The kingdom of Ilarion lay under a heavy gray sky, its tall towers casting long, melancholy shadows over streets deserted by joy. The air smelled faintly of rain and dust, and the wind whispered secrets through cracked stone walls. For months, the people had watched their king, Alaric, slip away, his once commanding presence reduced to a pale, fragile figure who barely spoke. His illness had no name, and no healer had succeeded in restoring him. Rumors swirled through the palace corridors like restless ghosts. Some whispered that the king's life had been taken by a curse, a punishment for sins committed generations ago. Others claimed that only a silent Omega, a healer of rare power and quiet strength, could save him. Many called her a myth, a figure of hope whispered about in villages far from the castle. Yet now, with the king on the edge of death, hope had no choice but to grasp at myths. The doors to the throne room opened one gray morning, and a figure stepped inside. Seraphine, the silent Omega, moved with calm certainty. Her long, dark hair framed a pale face, her eyes holding both sorrow and strength. She carried no weapons, no armor, only a small satchel containing herbs, crystals, and scrolls of ancient, whispered magic. The courtiers recoiled slightly, unsure if she was real or merely a spirit come to judge them for their failures. The king, however, barely stirred at her entrance. His once fiery eyes were dull, shadowed by sickness and pain. "Your Majesty," Seraphine said softly, bowing, "I have come to help you. If you allow me, I can heal you." A faint cough escaped the king, and he turned his face toward her. "Heal me." His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Do you know what I am, woman? Do you know what I have endured? Can you even imagine the shadows that cling to me?" Seraphine did not flinch. She had heard these words before. Many had doubted her, feared her, or challenged her. She knelt beside the bed, placing a hand lightly on the king's wrist. Her touch was gentle, yet it hummed with power that the castle walls seemed to recognize and fear. "I do not claim to know everything, Your Majesty," she said, "but I can guide the illness away from you. I can ease your pain. I can give you life again." The king's lips twitched, the faintest hint of a smile or perhaps a sneer. "You speak with such certainty, little healer, and yet, what if you fail, what if you cannot?" Seraphine's hand did not tremble. She closed her eyes, breathing in the energy around him, the pulse of his blood, the faint echo of a curse in his veins, the rhythm of life clinging stubbornly to the edge of oblivion. "Then I will try again, and again until I succeed. You will not die today, King Alaric." "Not while I am here." For a long moment the room was silent. The courtiers watched, some with fear, some with hope, as a quiet light seemed to gather around the healer. The king's chest rose and fell unevenly, but he allowed her to move her hands over him, chanting softly under her breath, her voice a melody of wind, water, and quiet strength. Hours passed. The candles flickered, their flames bending as if to listen. The king's breathing, once ragged and shallow, began to deepen. Color returned to his cheeks, and the fever that had burned his flesh slowly faded. Every word, every movement Seraphine made was precise, filled with an elegance that belied the immense power she wielded quietly, without flourish. Finally, she sat back on her heels, exhausted but serene. The king opened his eyes fully for the first time in weeks. Their eyes met, dark, stormy eyes meeting calm, unwavering ones. I feel stronger," he whispered. His hand moved slightly, reaching for hers. She pulled back lightly, her eyes steady. "You are not yet fully healed," she said softly. "The shadows still cling to you. But your body, your life is yours once more. The rest will take time." Alaric's lips pressed into a thin line, a mixture of awe and unease flickering across his face. You have done what none could." And yet, his voice faltered, betraying a fear he had not admitted even to himself. "I do not like the debt I owe you." Seraphine's gaze did not waver. "I ask no debt, Your Majesty. I ask only that you live." For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Then quietly, Alaric's hand gripped hers, not harshly, but with a force that carried the weight of his pride, his fear, and something unspoken yet powerful. "You will not leave," he said, low and certain. "I will not allow it." Seraphine froze, the faintest shiver passing through her. In all the years of healing, of wandering from village to village, she had never encountered someone who sought to claim her presence so intensely. She was used to being sought for power, for protection, for miracles, but not for the heart, and never by a king who had walked the edge of death and darkness as he had. I am not bound to you," she said softly, pulling her hand back gently. "I come and go as I choose." Alaric's eyes darkened. "No, you are here now, you saved me, you will stay, I will see to it." The courtiers exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered of danger in the king's words, others of hope. Seraphine, however, did not fear him, not yet. She understood the complexities of power, of the alpha's nature, and the storm of emotion that could exist beneath a calm surface. But even she felt the chill of what those words implied. That night, the palace seemed to shift around them. The walls felt closer, shadows lengthening and curling like living things. Alaric did not sleep, and Seraphine, despite her fatigue, remained near him, keeping vigil. Every so often he would reach for her, testing the boundaries between gratitude, need, and desire. She met his gaze with steady calm, though her heart quickened. By the first light of dawn, the king was fully awake, seated on the edge of his bed. He looked smaller in his human fragility, yet there remained the undeniable aura of strength and command that had made him Alpha of Ilarion. He turned to Seraphine, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes burned with a storm she could not yet name. "You have done the impossible," he said quietly, almost reverently, "and now I cannot let you go." Seraphine felt a weight settle in her chest. She had come to heal a man, not to become part of his life, not to be claimed. Yet she could not deny the pull she felt toward him, the silent, unspoken understanding that had formed between them during the hours of healing, the subtle recognition of shared strength and solitude. Outside, the mist rolled over the kingdom like a river of silver. Within the walls, a quiet tension settled, binding healer and king together in ways neither fully understood. The palace whispered its secrets, shadows stretching long into the corners of the rooms as if the walls themselves held their breath. And in that heavy, delicate stillness, both Alaric and Seraphine understood something vital and terrifying. Their fates were no longer their own. The bond of healing had tied them together, stronger than blood, stronger than promise. And as the sun rose pale over the kingdom of Ilarion, a silent truth settled between them, one that neither could ignore. The morning after Seraphine had healed King Alaric, the palace of Ilarion was quieter than usual. The servants moved with careful steps, unsure whether to whisper or remain silent, as though the very stones of the palace walls had become witnesses to the bond formed overnight. Alaric walked through the halls with measured pace, his hand brushing the railing of the grand staircase as if grounding himself to reality. Seraphine followed at a distance, her robes swaying softly, silent as a shadow. Though she had restored life to the king, she was no longer a visitor. The magic that had healed him had woven an invisible tether between them, binding their fates in ways neither fully understood. For the first time, the healer felt the weight of responsibility that was no longer hers alone. The king entered the council chamber, the heavy oak doors creaking in protest. Nobles and ministers gathered, their faces etched with worry and expectation. Yet their concern was nothing compared to the quiet tension that hung in the air between the Alpha King and the silent Omega. "You will stay with me," Alaric declared as he took his seat at the head of the table. His voice was firm, and for the first time in weeks it carried the authority that had once commanded kingdoms. "Not as a visitor, not as a guest, you will be here." Seraphine's dark eyes met his, calm but unwavering. "I am here to heal your majesty, that is my duty." "I am not a prisoner of your gratitude, nor of your desire." Alaric's jaw tightened. "Do you think I asked for your opinion? Your power saved me. That alone ensures your presence here." A ripple passed through the council chamber. Whispers of fear and intrigue stirred as nobles exchanged glances. Some admired Alaric's decisiveness. Others questioned the wisdom of claiming a healer as a permanent presence in the court. Seraphine remained composed, her face a mask of serene authority that challenged even the king's command. Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Seraphine walked among the dew-drenched flowers. Alaric approached, his boots crunching softly on the stone path. Moonlight still lingered, clinging to the petals and casting silver shadows. "You know," Alaric began, his voice low, "I am not used to being vulnerable, not to anyone. And yet," he paused, searching her eyes, "I feel unsettled when you are near. And when you are not, I am restless." Seraphine studied him, noting the flicker of raw honesty beneath his commanding exterior. "You have spent your life as Alpha. It is natural to feel unsettled when someone sees beyond the walls you have built." Alaric's expression darkened slightly. "I do not like it. I am the king. I am supposed to control everything." "And yet," Seraphine whispered, stepping closer, "there are things you cannot control: life, death, feelings, fate, and now me." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable, filled instead with the electric tension of two strong wills and hearts learning to navigate uncharted territory. Weeks passed, and the palace adjusted to the presence of Seraphine. She moved silently through the halls, tending to Alaric's health and subtly influencing the court. Nobles sought her advice, some with reverence, others with suspicion. Rumors grew that she was more than a healer, that she possessed a rare, dangerous power that could shift the balance of life and death. Despite the growing respect, Seraphine remained cautious. She had seen the hunger for power in many hearts, and Alaric's authority made her wary. Yet every encounter with him left her unsettled in a different way. The moments of vulnerability he allowed her, the flashes of warmth beneath his alpha exterior, stirred emotions she had long kept buried. One evening, as a storm rolled over the kingdom, Alaric summoned her to his private study. Rain lashed against the tall windows, thunder rumbling in the distance. The king sat behind his desk, eyes shadowed and intent. "There are threats coming," he said abruptly. "The neighboring kingdom sees weakness in my near death. They believe this is the time to strike, to take what they cannot earn." Seraphine moved to stand beside him, feeling the weight of her responsibility. "I will protect you," she said softly, her voice steady as the wind outside. "No harm will come to you while I am here." Alaric studied her, a mixture of admiration and possessiveness in his gaze. "It is not enough that you healed me," he said quietly, almost a whisper. "I need you with me always. You cannot leave. You must stay." Seraphine felt a shiver, not of fear, but of awareness. The king's words were not mere command. They were a reflection of the bond forged in the quiet hours of life and death. She could sense the storm in his heart, the clash of duty, pride, and desire. Days later, the threat manifested. Scouts reported movement at the borders, shadows of soldiers moving under the cover of night. The castle prepared for conflict, and Alaric's resolve hardened. Seraphine, too, prepared, not with weapons of steel, but with the quiet power that flowed through her veins, the same power that had drawn life back to the king. The first attack came under the cloak of darkness. Shadowy figures slipped past the outer walls, attempting to infiltrate the palace. Seraphine met them silently, her hands glowing faintly with soft, ethereal light. The intruders faltered, unable to advance against the power she wielded with serene mastery. Alaric followed, his sword cutting through the chaos but always returning to her side, eyes flickering with worry and awe. "You risk too much," he said as he caught his breath, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. "You could be hurt." "And you could die," she replied calmly. "I will not let that happen, not to you." For a fleeting moment their hands brushed, sending a shiver that was neither cold nor unwelcome. Alaric's gaze darkened, not with anger, but with the storm of feelings he barely understood. Gratitude, longing, fear, and a fierce need to protect what he could not yet claim fully. After the attackers were driven back, the palace was silent again, save for the distant roll of thunder. Seraphine knelt to mend minor injuries, her eyes focused on the task, though Alaric watched her closely. "You have become indispensable," he said finally, almost reluctantly. "Not just for my life, for my mind, my court, everything. I cannot imagine this palace without you." Seraphine paused, looking up. "I do not belong here," she said softly. "I am a healer, not a queen or advisor. I am needed for life, not politics." Alaric's hand rested briefly on hers, firm yet gentle. "You belong here," he said simply, the certainty in his voice leaving no room for argument. "Not because I say so, because the world bends around the bond we share. I will not let you leave." The tension between them grew, unspoken but palpable. Every glance, every movement carried layers of meaning. Seraphine began to understand the depth of his possessiveness, not as cruelty, but as a desperate fear of losing what had saved him. And Alaric began to realize that the healer was no ordinary woman. Her calm strength, her quiet courage, and her unwavering moral compass challenged him in ways he had never experienced. Yet beneath the growing trust and mutual dependence, danger still loomed. The neighboring kingdom would not give up so easily. The magical bond that had saved Alaric made him stronger, but it also tied Seraphine's fate to his. Any harm that came to her could ripple into his life. One night, as the moonlight poured through the high windows of the king's chamber, Alaric spoke softly, almost to himself. "If they take you, even for a moment, I do not know what I would do. I would tear the world apart to bring you back." Seraphine's heart beat faster, though her face remained serene. She had heard the words, understood their weight, but she knew better than to respond hastily. Instead, she reached out, laying a gentle hand on his arm. "We face this together," she said quietly. "Not as king and healer, but as two souls bound by what we have endured. Whatever comes, we face it side by side." Alaric's stormy eyes softened slightly, the first hint of humility in weeks. Yet his grip remained firm, possessive in the way only an alpha could be when he realized that something, or someone, could not be replaced. Outside, the storm continued, lightning flashing across the sky, thunder echoing through the palace halls. Inside, tension and longing intertwined like vines around a pillar, strong and unyielding. The night stretched, holding its breath, as if the castle itself understood that the quiet bond forming between the healer and the king would change the course of the kingdom forever. And as the first rays of dawn filtered through the tall windows, Seraphine realized a truth she had not admitted even to herself. Her presence in the palace, her bond with the Alpha King, was no longer a choice. It was destiny. And the king, who had once stood on the brink of death, would not allow her to leave. The wind howled through the forests surrounding the kingdom of Ilarion, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and distant danger. Within the palace, King Alaric walked the grand halls with quiet intensity. The days since Seraphine's arrival had been filled with uneasy calm, each moment between them heavy with unspoken truths and growing tension. He could no longer ignore what he felt, a storm of longing and protectiveness that clawed at his pride and control. Seraphine moved through the palace with her usual silent grace, tending to the king's health and observing the court. But her eyes, sharp and perceptive, noticed shadows where others did not. Courtiers whispering too long in darkened corridors, servants glancing fearfully at unseen threats, and a restless energy that hummed just beyond the walls. Something was stirring in the kingdom, something dangerous. One evening, the king summoned her to the tower library, a vast room filled with ancient tomes and the scent of old parchment. The storm outside rattled the windows, and lightning briefly illuminated the high ceilings, casting intricate shadows across the stone walls. "I need you to understand something," Alaric said, his voice low and steady. "The illness that nearly killed me, it was not natural. It was magic, old and bitter, tied to my bloodline, a curse passed down through generations. I survived only because of you, Seraphine, but surviving does not mean the danger is gone." Seraphine's eyes narrowed, her fingers brushing the edge of a leather-bound book. "A curse?" she asked softly. "Then my healing may have saved your life, but it may not have freed your bloodline from the shadows that cling to it." Alaric nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I have kept secrets. Some are not fit for the ears of courtiers or even advisors. But I trust you. I must. There is a darkness within me, a part I cannot fight alone." The weight in the room pressed against Seraphine's chest, yet she felt a strange pull toward it. The Alpha's honesty, rare and raw, invited her closer even as it warned her of the dangers ahead. She stepped nearer, her voice soft but unwavering. "Then we face it together," she said. "You and I, not as king and healer, but as two souls bound by what has already been endured." Alaric's hand brushed against hers, not lightly this time, but with a strength that was both grounding and possessive. "Do you realize what you are saying?" he asked, his voice trembling just enough to reveal the depth of his emotion. "If this darkness rises again, it will not only threaten me, but you as well. You are tied to my fate now, Seraphine. I will not, cannot let you go." The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the tall windows, as if echoing the turmoil within the room. Seraphine did not flinch. She had faced danger before, both natural and magical, and she knew fear was a tool, not a weapon. Yet the king's words, the intensity in his gaze, stirred something unfamiliar in her. A desire, yes, but also a wary awareness of how fragile their bond truly was. In the days that followed, the danger Alaric had warned of began to manifest. Scouts returned with disturbing news. Shadows moving at the edges of the kingdom, spies and infiltrators testing the strength of the walls, and rumors of a neighboring kingdom seeking to exploit Alaric's near death. Each threat made the king more restless, more intense, more impossible to read. His gaze lingered on Seraphine longer than necessary, and his presence was almost suffocating in its intensity. One evening, Seraphine ventured into the palace gardens under the pale moonlight, seeking a moment of solitude. The flowers were slick with rain, their petals trembling in the breeze. She knelt by a small fountain, dipping her fingers into the cool water, feeling the soft hum of magic beneath the surface. The stillness was comforting, a rare reprieve from the tension of the castle. But it was short-lived. Alaric approached silently, his boots leaving wet prints on the stone path. "You should not be out here alone," he said, his voice low, carrying both warning and concern. "I can handle myself," Seraphine replied, though she did not move. She had faced greater dangers than storms and shadows. "And yet you follow me, always." Alaric's eyes darkened, the storm within him mirrored by the clouds above. "I follow because I cannot bear the thought of losing you, not now, not ever." Their hands brushed as he stepped closer, the air thick with unspoken emotion. Seraphine felt the pull, the gravity of his alpha presence pressing against her. "The bond between us, it is not just healing," she said softly. "It ties our fates together. Danger follows you, but it could reach me as well. I cannot ignore that." Alaric's fingers tightened around hers, not roughly, but with unyielding force. "Then we face it together," he said, his voice almost a growl, his need and protectiveness blending with raw emotion. "I cannot promise the world will be safe, but I can promise that you will not face it alone." That night, as lightning split the sky, Seraphine's thoughts turned to the curse Alaric had spoken of. If the disease that had nearly killed him was part of an ancient magic, then the threads binding their fates were even more delicate than she had imagined. She pored over old texts in the library, seeking insight, finding faint traces of forgotten rituals, warnings of dark power, and stories of alpha kings bound to mystical allies. Each page she read made the bond with Alaric feel both more fragile and more profound. Days later, scouts reported movement within the palace grounds, unseen intruders who sought Seraphine herself. The neighboring kingdom's spies had discovered her importance and the power she wielded. Their plan was not to kill Alaric, but to capture the Omega who had restored his life, believing that controlling her meant controlling him. The first confrontation came on a moonless night. Seraphine stood in the main hall, her hands glowing with soft, ethereal light, her calm determination radiating like armor. Shadows moved along the walls, figures attempting to strike with stealth and speed. She focused, her voice whispering words of ancient power. A protective barrier shimmered around her, repelling the attackers with waves of quiet, radiant energy. Alaric arrived, his sword flashing, cutting through the chaos, but his eyes never left Seraphine. She moved as if part of the palace itself, graceful and lethal, each movement precise and controlled. He realized in awe that her magic was as formidable as any army, yet she wielded it with serenity rather than aggression. After the intruders were repelled, the hall was quiet except for the echo of retreating footsteps. Seraphine knelt to restore minor injuries, her energy spent but her composure intact. Alaric watched her closely, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword, but his mind focused on her. "You risk too much," he said finally, his voice low. "You could be harmed. And you could die," she replied, her tone calm, almost like a mirror to his own intensity. "I will not let that happen, not to you." The tension between them, unspoken yet electric, grew with every encounter. The king's possessiveness, born of gratitude and fear, deepened, while Seraphine's quiet strength and independence challenged him. They were two forces, equally powerful in different ways, bound by the fragile thread of fate and magic. In the quiet aftermath, Alaric found her in the tower library once more. Rain pounded against the windows, lightning illuminating the high ceilings. He stood behind her, his hand brushing her shoulder, careful yet possessive. "Seraphine," he said softly, almost reverently, "you are more than I imagined. Your power, your courage, your calm in the face of danger. I have never known someone like you." And yet, he paused, struggling to contain the storm within him. "I cannot let you go." Seraphine turned, her gaze steady, though her heart raced. "You will not control me, Alaric. I am tied to your fate, yes, but my path, my choices are still mine." Alaric's expression softened, but the intensity did not fade. "Perhaps," he admitted, "but my world has changed since you arrived. You have touched more than my life, you have touched my soul, and that I will not relinquish." Outside, the storm continued, relentless and unyielding. Inside, tension, longing, and unspoken desire intertwined, binding the healer and the king ever closer. Shadows and secrets still lurked at the edges of the kingdom, but in the quiet moments, Alaric and Seraphine discovered a fragile, unbreakable truth. Whatever darkness approached, they would face it together. But even as they stood side by side, they both knew that the greatest challenge was not the enemy at the gates, nor the curses of the past. It was the storm within their own hearts. The sky above Ilarion was a canvas of rolling storm clouds, dark and heavy, as if the heavens themselves had gathered to witness the fate of the kingdom. Lightning fractured the darkness in brilliant, jagged lines, illuminating the tall towers of the palace and casting the ancient stone walls into sharp relief. Inside, King Alaric and Seraphine stood at the heart of the storm, their breath steady but tense, hearts pounding with the knowledge that the greatest trial of their lives was about to unfold. For weeks, whispers of invasion had grown louder. Scouts had brought news of armies moving in silence across the northern forests, allied with magic users who sought the power of Seraphine herself. They had realized that controlling the silent Omega meant controlling the Alpha King. And so, the palace, already heavy with shadows and secrets, became a fortress on the edge of chaos. Alaric's gaze swept across the halls, taking in the preparations and the tension in his people. He had grown stronger since his near death, but strength alone was not enough. He needed Seraphine, not merely as healer, but as the partner who could help him confront the darkness both outside and within. His hand found hers, and in that small connection both found grounding amid the storm. "You feel it too," he said quietly, the storm outside echoing the urgency in his voice. "The darkness is coming, and it will not be gentle." Seraphine nodded, her calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos. "I know," she said softly, "but together we can face it. The bond between us is stronger than the threats beyond these walls." The first attack came just as twilight bled into night. Figures cloaked in shadow descended upon the palace from hidden paths in the surrounding forest. Alaric's guards met them with swords and shields, but the intruders were swift, coordinated, and unnerving. Seraphine stepped forward, hands glowing with a gentle, radiant light that pushed back the darkness. Wave after wave of attackers met her magic. Her spells were precise, flowing like water, each movement a testament to her skill and calm control. The air shimmered with energy, bending around her, repelling the invaders without causing unnecessary harm. Yet even as she fought, she knew this was more than a test of skill. It was a test of trust and connection, of the bond that tied her fate to Alaric's. Alaric moved beside her, his sword cutting through the shadows, his focus absolute. His movements were fierce and deliberate, yet his eyes constantly sought Seraphine, ensuring her safety. Together they were a storm of light and strength, unmatched in combination. Yet the longer the battle raged, the more Alaric realized the danger. The attackers had come for Seraphine, and their magic sought to exploit her bond with him. When the battle reached its peak, the palace trembled, and a sudden dark energy surged through the attackers, forcing Seraphine to draw deeply on her magic. Her hands glowed brighter than ever before, her body trembling with the strain. Alaric saw it immediately. Her energy was reaching a breaking point, and if she pushed further, it could cost her life. "Seraphine," he shouted over the roar of the storm, moving to her side. "Do not push beyond yourself, I will handle them." But she shook her head, determination fierce in her eyes. "No, we face this together, Alaric. If I falter, so will you. I cannot stand aside while you fight alone." For a moment, time seemed to pause. Thunder rolled in the distance, the wind whipping their hair and robes, as if the world itself acknowledged the choice before them. Alaric saw the truth. Seraphine's courage was not merely magical. It was the courage of a soul unwilling to abandon another, bound by loyalty, trust, and something far deeper. Together, they channeled their strength. Alaric's sword became an extension of Seraphine's energy, their movements perfectly synchronized, flowing with a rhythm that neither had fully anticipated but both instinctively understood. The intruders faltered, their coordinated attack breaking against the power and unity of the two bound souls. When the dust settled, the attackers lay defeated, scattered into the shadows, their dark magic dissipated. The palace walls were scorched in places, banners torn, but the heart of Ilarion remained unbroken. Seraphine sank to her knees, exhausted, her magic nearly spent. Alaric knelt beside her, his hand steadying her shoulder. "You should rest," he said softly, worry evident in his stormy gaze. "You gave everything, yet you stand here alive. I cannot let anything happen to you again." Seraphine's fingers brushed his, and for a fleeting moment the weight of battle and danger faded. "We survived," she whispered. "Together, that is what matters." But the battle was only the beginning. In the aftermath, Seraphine uncovered fragments of the curse that had nearly killed Alaric. It was a dark pact made generations ago by a previous king. tied to the bloodline, linking life and death in a delicate balance. To fully break it, a sacrifice of both courage and power was required, a willingness to face the unknown and give a part of oneself to restore the balance of fate. Alaric, reading the text she brought, understood the gravity. "This is why I could not die," he said quietly. "The bond between us, it is more than healing. It is destiny, and destiny demands a price." Seraphine looked into his eyes, seeing both fear and determination. "We face it together," she repeated. "Whatever it asks, we answer as one." The ritual to break the curse took place in the sacred heart of the palace, a chamber hidden beneath the tallest tower. Candles flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. Magic hummed in the air, thick and potent, resonating with the bond between healer and king. Alaric and Seraphine joined hands, their energy intertwining, creating a luminous web of light that filled the chamber. The power of the curse resisted, manifesting as dark tendrils of shadow that sought to separate them, to pull them into despair and fear. Alaric's grip tightened on Seraphine's hand, and in that act of connection both drew strength from one another. "You are not alone," Alaric whispered, voice fierce yet tender. "I am here, always." "And I am here," Seraphine replied, her calm determination radiating through the storm of magic. "Together we endure." The final moment of the ritual required them to release a part of themselves. Alaric offered his pride, his rigid control over life and death, and Seraphine offered a fragment of her life force, the essence that made her more than a healer. The energy surged, bright and blinding, until the darkness was consumed entirely. When the light faded, the chamber was quiet, and the storm outside had eased to a gentle rain. Alaric and Seraphine looked at each other, exhausted but unbroken. The curse was gone, the kingdom safe, and the bond between them solidified, no longer a tether of necessity but a choice freely made. Alaric traced her hand against his chest, feeling the rhythm of her heart against his own. "You healed me," he said softly, voice thick with emotion. "Body, soul, and heart, and now I will never let you go." Seraphine smiled faintly, warmth in her eyes. "And I will never leave, not because I am bound to you, but because I choose to stay." Outside the palace, the sun broke through the clouds, painting the kingdom in gold. Birds returned to the trees, and the streets, once heavy with fear, began to stir with life again. Within the palace walls, however, two souls remained intertwined, their scars and trials only strengthening the bond that had grown from survival, trust, and shared courage. In the quiet of the sacred chamber, Alaric and Seraphine stood together, hands entwined, hearts aligned, knowing that the trials they had faced had changed them forever. They had confronted death, darkness, and destiny itself, and emerged not only victorious but transformed. And in that transformation, they found something greater than magic, greater than power, greater than even fate itself. A bond of trust, respect, and love that neither time nor shadow could ever sever. The Alpha King and the Silent Omega had faced the darkness, and in doing so, had forged a light that would endure for the rest of their days.